Hey guys, Jay at Broader Performance here. So what I want to talk about today is the 4R70W, 4R75W. I'm a big fan of this transmission, but I gotta be honest, sometimes I really hate it. And the reason I hate it, it's got a design flaw in it. And what happens with these, if you don't already know, typically in first gear, they'll develop this problem, and this can certainly be on a rebuilt, old one, whatever. What happens with it is when you take off in first gear, it'll pop into neutral, and it may stay in neutral, or it may all of a sudden just bang back in, and like a neutral drop, like you would do with your parents' car when you were young and dumb, and you'd stick it in neutral and rev it up and throw it in drive so it would burn rubber. This thing does it on its own, and that's very destructive. It's very annoying, and it's really not all that easy to fix on this unit. And aside from that one issue, it's a great unit. Works great in hot rods. It's pretty compact. It's 4-speed with overdrive, has a lockup converter, a lot of controller support for it. A fair amount of aftermarket support. They'll hold a lot of power. We've got a guy that runs, like 850s in the quarter with it, and it holds up. And it's a good all-around transmission. It's a great street transmission. I can't say enough good about it, but with this one problem that it has, it's pretty aggravating, and it has really caused me a lot of pain, honestly. I build a lot of these, and you talk to other builders, and they say, oh, well, I clean the bore, I do this or that, or I use this particular shift kit, or, whatever it is. Well, sometimes these things work, sometimes they don't. I've just not found the consistency that you hope for. Every time I put one on the dyno, I'm nervous, knowing that, oh my God, is it going to do this to me? How long is it going to take to get this one out the door and working properly? And thank God for the dyno, because you can, for the most part, sort this out before the customer ever gets it. On a very rare occasion, the customer does get it, and it starts doing it on them, and they are not happy, to say the least. I'm probably even less happy because I know how much I put into it, and I have a lot of knowledge on this unit. It's one of my specialties, and where a lot of other shops, it's something they'll build and have built and can build, but they don't understand them. I've spent a lot of time trying to understand this valve body, and so what I'm going to show you here is what's going on, and we're going to put this on the valve body dyno, and I'm going to show you some things. I'm going to show you what exactly is going on with it, and I do have ways of fixing this. It's taken me a lot to figure it out. Done a lot of research on it. But overall, it's been a good seller and damn reliable for my customers, and it's just put a lot of stress on me as the builder and the product designer here, and I'm the guy that has to figure out why this doesn't work, when it doesn't work, and so it can be stressful at times. So let's look at what's going on and take a closer look here. So if you look here, this is the solenoid pressure regulator valve. This is where it goes. I have removed it. This is a valve body I'm going to build for experimental purposes and test purposes, just to show you guys how I approach these kind of problems and what I've got to do here. And my whole point of this is really to just show you that, if you're buying a transmission from us, I try to understand these things best to my ability, and I address them. I don't try to rely on luck, or there's a lot of fixes on the marketplace for this. Man, in my opinion, a lot of it's just flim-flam. Teflon coated valves and nonsense and stuff that just doesn't really work. And it might work on a few units. It might, may work, may not, may work for a while. You're not really addressing the issue. You're just making an assumption. So the assumption is that this valve sticks. And it does stick. It can happen. And this causes, so what is actually happening here is when this valve sticks, it causes so typically this is a problem in first gear. So your neutral drop is in first. And there's a valve here. This is the 3/4 shift valve. And what this valve does is it drops the oil pressure to the forward clutch. So when we're in first gear and we drop pressure to the forward clutch, that creates neutral. When you're in third gear and we drop forward clutch, that creates overdrive, which is a desirable effect. But also one of the problems is your controller may command third, and instead of going to third, she'll just shift right into overdrive. So it goes from 2 to 4, and this can be destructive for the transmission as well, not to mention annoying and all that sort of thing from a driver's standpoint. So this 3/4 shift valve is here, and I've removed that also. And then like I showed you down here is your solenoid pressure regulator. So what this does, it drops your line pressure. Pressure seems to be roughly 56 to 58 pounds. It seems to be about ideal. If it spikes much more than that, it'll create these problems, and it's very frustrating. And it doesn't have to spike very much. We're talking, I believe I have tested this, and I think about 63, 65 pounds in first, it'll drop into neutral. And that's not a big variation. And when you understand pressure regulators and, line pressures varying, and this has to accommodate those changes quickly, it's very easy to go 5 or 10 pounds over for a brief instant and create this, or sometimes the pressure just stays up there. One of the things that's important on this unit is the oil. And these take Mercon 5. Don't put the 3 or the 2 in it. You most likely, if you do, you're going to have this problem as well as others. This transmission came out, I don't know, like 93, 94 or somewhere around there. And that was already starting to get to where these transmissions, or should say automatic transmissions in general, are just, they get finicky. If you don't have the right oil in them, it relies on the oil viscosity for the circuits to work properly, flow rates and solenoids and things. They'll start giving you trouble. So very important, Mercon 5 in this unit. Probably also important not to overheat this unit too much. That's something that can be an issue as well. If the oil temperature is high, it changes the viscosity. Yeah, it can cause these issues. It's going to change this pressure regulation, and it can be an issue. So you want to be careful of this. Very important. There is a additive on the market that will supposedly convert 3 to 5 if you make the mistake. I've had limited success with it. Sometimes it really works, sometimes it doesn't, and you end up having to flush the unit out and putting the right stuff in it, and then it'll work better for you. So anyways, what I want to kind of go over right now is I'm gonna modify this one so that we can actually adjust the pressure regulation on this solenoid regulator valve here. I'm also going to show you how sensitive it is. We're going to watch this on the valve body dyno, which I'll show you in a second here. So if you look right here, this is the solenoid pressure regulator valve. It's pretty short, so they can tend to maybe get cocked in the bore and want to stick and things like that. That's the theory. Yeah, they do stick. That is an issue, but it's really not the issue most of the time. Older units that get dirty and things like that, or if you have a failure for one reason or another, yeah, that's an issue. But when it's a new, clean unit and it's doing it to you and you're going out of your mind trying to figure out why, and you keep taking the valve body out and you keep brushing the bore and trying to look for burrs and put the valve in and out 1,000 times, make sure it's nice and free and loose, and sometimes that doesn't work. Matter of fact, a lot of times it doesn't work, and sometimes you end up overworking the bore and things get worse. And like I said, there's a lot of fixes on the market for this, but I don't have much good to say about most of them. And I'm not going to badmouth brands or particular fixes or anything. I don't want to do that to anybody, but you'll see what I'm talking about here. I'm going to do another video on this. Maybe it'll be 2 videos on this of taking a look at this. So I want to, and this is the 3/4 valve I'm looking at here. This is the one that gets, if you have too much pressure, it strokes this. And I've experimented with changing this spring pressure and things. And there's a lot of things I've tried. Most of it didn't work. I've got a little recipe I do now that, knock on wood, seems to be working really well for me. And a little off topic, but one thing I want to mention here is you're working on valve bodies. I get a lot of emails and phone calls. Hey man, I took your valve body apart and this spring popped out or this ball fell out. Where does it go? Well, guys, if you're going to work on this stuff, come on. You got spring-loaded valves in these bores. You got to expect things to come flying out. Don't just start pulling clips and having things shoot across the room and spilling stuff. Pay attention to what you're doing. Go slow. This is not something you're going to knock out in 5 minutes. Valve body work takes time, takes a lot of patience. And you can see my high-tech method here. This is a dirty old, detailing cloth that, as I take valves out, I put it on there. It's just kind of thick. They tend not to roll around, and I just lay things out the way they came out. Nothing high-tech. This is still what I use. I'm a little embarrassed to say I don't have a fancy tray that you can buy that some people use, and all that stuff's fine too. But, get a rag and lay things out and go slow. This stuff springs want to pop out on you. So I just wanted to kind of get on my soapbox a little bit about that. I'm tired of those questions. Hey, man, I need a diagram on this, and getting pissed off at me if I don't have something to send them. Because most information on stuff I design is in my brain, and yeah, I really need to make diagrams and have more things in writing, but you get busy and you get overwhelmed when you're the guy doing all this stuff, and I just don't always have diagrams to send somebody. So just be careful, if it's something especially you're not familiar with or something that's been modified, even though you think, oh, well, I know all about 4R70Ws, I can work on this valve body no problem. Well, if it's a modified valve body, you better know how to take them apart and lay things out, because you may be surprised. Things are not in there like you think. So just quickly here, I'm going to show you, and this is, and you kind of laugh at this, but this is a homemade valve body dyno I made years ago. And it's just kind of one of those working man blues kind of thing. I never painted it. I never deburred the edges on it. It's got sharp edges, and you can see that here's my switches that activate the solenoids and things for the 4R70W. I don't even have them labeled. Of course, I know what they are. I don't really need labels on them, but I didn't build this thing to sell it. I built it as a working man's tool. And you can see my awesome labels with magic marker and masking tape. be honest with you, I've used this thing so much I don't even need the labels anymore. But when I do the next video, I'm going to probably go all out and pick up a roll of masking tape and get the magic marker out and redo these so you can see them. Because I know most of you aren't going to know, well, none of you are really going to know where these gauges are. But the purpose of these gauges is they're tied to a particular circuit. And one of the things I added was down here, if you look, the lower pressure gauge only goes to 160, where all the others go to 300. This gauge here is going to be for our solenoid pressure regulator, because we're looking at a much lower pressure than we're going to see in the other circuits. So, and you'll see how a lot of the circuits are regulated, like servo apply is regulated and the low reverse is regulated at times. And so these are interesting things to see on how these valve bodies actually work. And this is something you don't really see if you have a transmission dyno. You know, you typically see, I mean, you do have ports on the 4R70W, but you don't really see as much detail as you do on the valve body dyno. And this is pretty crude and it's pretty simple, but it works. I just took an old 4R70W case, and you can see all the hoses and wires coming off of it. I've just tapped these gauges into the various ports and things, and that's pretty much it. It's, I always had plans to pretty this thing up and all that, but God's honest truth, it was basically just built for our use in-house, and I'm not selling these. So I never made it pretty. I just made it functional. But you'll see how it all works in the next video. It's pretty cool. And they have, fancy ones you can buy that are commercially available. And they have computers on them now. They don't use analog gauges. Personally, I prefer analog gauges rather than digital. I don't like the movement on digital, and they're dampened. And analog gauges, you can just see what's happening. And these gauges here, they're not highly dampened. I want them to bounce and respond. I want to see that. I kind of know what I'm looking for. I don't really need a computer to tell me what the gauges should look like and this and that. And those machines are nice and impressive, and they do have their place. And they also cost as much as a new car as well. And tooling's very expensive. My tooling here is an old case that probably had a broken bell housing that I machined off, and it's not pretty, but it certainly works, and it's kind of nice to actually have an original case rather than something that's simulated or anything like that. So and this is another one I have and use quite a bit. This is a commercially bought unit, much prettier than mine. This is an older one, I don't know, probably made in the 80s or something, and it's a nice machine, and again, it's an old analog style, which I like. Kind of an old school guy, and I work on a lot of old stuff anyway, so works quite well. And it has these plates that they just come in and out with 3 wing nuts, and real quick and easy to change plates on it. Just nice machine, and I use it for a lot. And I use this one more often. This is more for older transmissions, C4s, C6s, AODs, things like that. Testing our manual valve bodies before they go out. Troubleshooting issues and things like that. So got a lot of gauges, nice panel, professionally labeled and engraved, and pretty cool. But then I got this, the masking tape works too. So we'll put some new tape on there with new labels. You guys will be impressed when you see that. But anyways, so this is what we're going to do. I'll make another video, maybe 2, where we actually modify this 4R70W valve body, put it on here, and run it and go through these pressures. That way you can see what's happening, and you'll learn something. I know I sure have learned something by using these types of machines. This was the first one I made, and it's really, it really upped the game for us. Understanding this stuff is key, especially if you're going to specialize in any particular unit. You have to understand it, and relying on, you know, this and that shift kit or valve body kit. I'm not supposed to say shift kit. That's a trademark, but whatever. So valve body kit, sorry. I don't want to get sued. And, you know, all these things, I mean, I don't want to talk bad about them because some of them are very good and very helpful, but a lot of them are not, at least with this particular problem. And you're kind of on your own sometimes. I've talked to a lot of builders on these, and they all have their method and things that they do and improves their success rate, but this still eats them up at times. And I've, you know, and more recently in the last year, I've had next to no trouble out of them now that I have done a lot of experimentation and come up with some modifications that work really well. And just so you know the honest truth, I'm not buying any of these valve body kit products anymore. Some of them seem to work okay for a while, and then I'd have trouble again, and I'm done with all that. I've got stuff that I do here to them, and main thing is just understanding this and realizing that, yeah, the valve sticking is one thing, but there's more to it than that. This unit, this is its downfall. It's a design flaw by Ford, in my opinion. It would have been the perfect unit had they added one more solenoid to it. At least in my opinion, this is just my opinion, but if they had added a solenoid on that 3/4 shift valve that was independent, this would have been the perfect overdrive unit. And this is the one thing about this unit I don't like, but don't get discouraged because it is fixable, and it's a damn good unit, and I've had great luck with it in spite of the problems I've had on the back end that you guys don't see. This is just kind of my pain that I go through, and sometimes it's frustrating. You're late on a job, and the customer says, hey, man, when's my 4R70W going to go out? And I'll have to say, well, shoot, I don't know. It's been on the dyno for 2 days. It's giving me trouble. I don't know what to tell you. And, you know, years ago it was, well, keep building another valve body until it works. But really, honestly, that's not even really the problem. I mean, yeah, that does work. You just keep building valve bodies and, hey, one just happens to work, and you got 3 that don't. Now, that's one way of doing it, but it causes a lot of stress on my end, and I lose a lot of time. So anyways, we're going to go over this in another video. This one's run over way longer than I wanted it to, but I got a lot to say about this unit. And you know, another thing you're going to see on these units is billet forward drums, because they say it breaks. Well, guess why it breaks? From the neutral drops, because this is the drum that slams on when this 3/4 shift valve decides to just come back in. Very violent on that drum, and the drum really I don't have issues with. I almost never really use a billet drum. As long as it's not neutral dropping, it typically will not break that drum. So there's a lot of things out there, you know, even your 3/4 shaft that tends to break, your intermediate shaft, any kind of violent shifting in and out on these units, or typically any unit, it breaks things. And buying a billet piece for hundreds of dollars isn't always the answer. At the end of the day, you still have to fix this stuff. You have to fix what's going on with it hydraulically. So that's what I'm going to show you here, and hopefully you'll learn something from this. And again, it's a great unit. Not trying to discourage anybody from buying one or building one, but it's just, this is just one of its, let's say idiosyncrasies, to be nice about it. that you just have to deal with. And as long as you address it, you're going to enjoy this unit. You really will. It's a much better unit than the GM versions and things like that, in my opinion, that have a lot more flaws than just this one. So we're going to work around this, and you're going to see how it works. And if you're interested in this kind of stuff, watch the next video.